When you lose weight, does your metabolism speed up or does it slow down? Oddly, for most people, when you weigh less, your basal metabolic rate actually slows. Imagine two vehicles. If you have a large car, it's going to guzzle gas, whereas a smaller vehicle, all things being equal, will be more fuel efficient. The same is true for your body. Here's how this plays out with dieting and why it can be a real challenge. Let's imagine you go on a restrictive diet. Maybe it's ketogenic or carnivore, maybe it's vegan or raw food. You choose your diet camp, whichever thing you're doing for 12 or 16 weeks. A typical restrictive diet protocol might have you withholding, let's say 500 calories per day. And you use willpower and meal plans. Maybe you even have a coach as you're going through the process. And at the end of your 3 months, you've lost weight. You were hungry all the time, but you lost weight. Now you're a smaller person. Here's the challenge. Now you need less calories to maintain than when you started. Well, that would be fine in an ideal world, but here's the thing. We are creatures of habit, and your eating patterns, in many cases, have been habituated for years or decades. That means your breakfasts and your snacks and your lunchtime, and it's very difficult to break that. When you go against primal urges like the need for sleep or sex or hunger, you will almost certainly lose. These urges are so overwhelming, there's really no amount of willpower or education when you're fighting with your own biology. And this is where we run into what I call the hungry all the time diet paradox, meaning in an attempt to lose weight and maintain your weight loss, you end up feeling hungry all the time, which is a constant tug of war, and one of the leading contributors to the typical yo-yo diet cycle. Many people can go on a 12-week diet and lose weight. Hardly anyone can keep it off long term. Hey, my name is Lucas. I'm a yoga teacher and a nutritional coach. For the past 20 years, I would say somewhere between 30 and 50% of my clients are interested or very interested in weight loss for health reasons, for health span reasons. So I spent a great deal of my career researching, interviewing health conferences, producing conferences, working with medical doctors all around the world in my podcast and publishing and a number of other ventures to try to figure out how to solve this problem. I don't have all the answers. This is a very, very complex issue. But in this video, here's what I'd like to share with you. Number one, why chasing metabolic speed is probably not your goal. Number two, the keystone of lean muscle and weight loss that's often overlooked and often very simple to leverage. And number three, I'd like to explore with you this idea of focusing on metabolic health, not just weight. Weight is important, but if you sometimes focus on metabolic health, sometimes there's a little more leverage there. I'll put a PDF link down in the description below if you'd like to skip ahead or get notes. You can click on that link down below. If you enjoy this video, I'd ask for your support. Here's what you do. Just hit subscribe, won't cost you anything, and it makes a big difference for me and for the channel. Lastly, as a disclaimer, I'm not a medical doctor, and if you have any diet, any nutrition program that's working for you, even if you have a pharmaceutical protocol that's working for you, ignore this video. Weight loss is complicated. If you've got something that works, don't pay any attention to me. Okay, let's talk about metabolic speed. Most of us think that if only we had a really fast metabolism, this would solve our problem. I often like to talk about Olympic swimmer Michael Phelps. 23 gold medals, looks like the bionic man. At his peak, he was alleged to eat somewhere between 10,000 and 12,000 calories per day. And if you've seen photos of what he claims he was eating, it's pretty exciting stuff. Pancakes, sugary breakfast cereals, cookies, crackers, biscuits, all the stuff we'd love to be able to eat but can't because we'll gain weight. It seems like if only we had the metabolism of Michael Phelps, our problems would be solved. Now, of course, Michael was spending 6 to 8 hours a day training and was at the peak of his athletic endurance, and he certainly doesn't eat that way today. He probably eats a similar caloric intake to you or me. However, this ideal gets stuck in our head. For me, growing up, it was a friend of mine named Chris, and Chris had a similar diet to Michael Phelps. Seems like he could eat whatever he wanted and never gain weight. But of course, Chris, in middle age now, suffers from most of the metabolic challenges that all the rest of us do and has a weight problem as well. So the goal is not to make your engine rev so much. The goal is really balance. And in seeking balance, especially as you're losing weight, whether you're doing that through dietary changes, restrictive dieting, time restrictive eating, maybe you're doing a very limited diet, high fat, high protein, high carb, we don't need to debate all the different diet approaches. If it works for you, it works for you. But what if, as you're losing weight, this is what I'd like to chat with you today about, what if you focused on maintaining for sure, but maybe even building some lean muscle? Lean muscle is a metabolic workhorse. Lean muscle helps to promote insulin sensitivity, so your body manages blood glucose better and much less likely to store body fat. Lean muscle also serves as a glucose dump. It's a place where your body can store extra energy. Lean muscle is a lot smaller in mass compared to body fat. It's also a lot more metabolically active. Whenever you start talking about lean muscle, almost everyone thinks of Arnold and big bodybuilding barbells, clanking weights, small tank tops, and steroids. It could be that, but it doesn't need to be. For most people, especially if you're new to resistance training, if you're new to building muscle, for most people, simple body weight exercises like air squats, like push-ups, like dips between chairs, and some variation of a pull or a row motion, either with a pull-up bar or some type of suspension trainer, simply those 4 exercises done twice a week, let's say in sets of 5, can make a massive, massive difference in terms of your lean muscle mass. Again, if you're experienced weightlifter, these things aren't going to move the needle. But if you're new to resistance training, like most of my clients are, your newbie gains, meaning in the first 12 to 16 weeks, are really exciting. People are worried, yeah, but I'm trying to lose weight. I don't want to bulk up. Don't worry, you won't bulk up, especially if you're doing body weight exercises. Even if you build lean muscle, a lot of people, they might actually put on a little bit of lean muscle weight, but in many cases they will look and feel thinner than before. Because remember, lean muscle is much more dense and a lot smaller than body fat. So that's my first idea, my first challenge for you. If you've never experimented with body weight training, big compound movements during a weight loss journey, it really doesn't take much. You don't have to clank weights. It doesn't have to be hardcore, no gym membership. And if you're new to it, you can get some really big results really quickly. Now, the third idea I want to share with you is around metabolic health in general. When people use the term metabolism, when we talk about Michael Phelps and his pancakes or my friend Chris and his Lucky Charms, we're usually thinking about how fast can we make our engine. But metabolic health is actually a lot more clearly defined, and it doesn't have anything to do with speed, because that really varies based on age and size and all kinds of other factors. But the five levers of metabolic health, weight is a big one, but specifically waist circumference. Because if you have a lot of extra fat on your legs or your shoulders, it's not really dangerous. But fat around your viscera, your midsection, this is very dangerous fat. And if we think of the journey of life towards healthy metabolism, if we think about it like a highway, like a road, there are some big potholes. And the biggest pothole, there are 5 different types of potholes. The biggest metabolic pothole for sure is your waist circumference, your weight. And that's why most people go after it for good reason. It is the big, bad, dangerous pothole, but it's also the most challenging one to fill. There are other smaller potholes, 4 specific ones we'll talk about now. And for many people, they're easier to attack, they're easier to address. But what a lot of people don't realize is by addressing one of these smaller potholes, it can have upstream effects on that big pothole, that weight pothole. It's not as dramatic as a crash diet. It's not going to fix your problem overnight, but it can really help you log wins and gain some momentum and also just improve your overall health as you go. What are these other smaller potholes? Well, aside from weight, we also have your blood glucose, the way in which your body manages blood sugar. This would be measured with a finger prick or a continuous glucose monitor, or even better, with a 3-month snapshot with what's called an A1C blood test, which will give you a 3-month snapshot of how you're managing your blood glucose. Another one would be your blood pressure. Another one would be your LDL cholesterol. This is your potentially atherosclerotic cholesterol, the potentially heart disease-inducing type of cholesterol. And then the last one would be your triglycerides. Let's talk specifically first about blood glucose. What if you're struggling with this up-down yo-yo cycle of dieting, what if you just put aside restrictive dieting for a moment? What if we just started attacking the problem, the metabolic challenge, with this smaller issue of blood glucose first? Why might we do that? Well, most people can move the needle pretty quickly. If you were to track most people's blood glucose throughout the day, every time they eat a meal, there's sort of a Mount Everest and then a valley. There's a Mount Everest and then a Grand Canyon. And if we can flatten the curve, meaning have less spikes and less deep valleys, most people feel less cravings. Most people feel more balanced energy. A lot of people sleep better. Their hormones get balanced, and it can have this really positive domino effect. Again, nowhere near as dramatic as a crash diet, but in many cases a lot more sustainable. How might you start to impact your blood glucose to avoid the Everest and Grand Canyon and flatten the curve? There are some really simple strategies. The first one is fiber first at meals. Fiber slows stomach emptying and can simply reduce the hit of a glucose spike after a meal. Fiber first, many people conjure up images of grandma mixing Metamucil in a cup, and that is a potential way to do it. In fact, psyllium husk has been proven to be very effective. But if that sounds repulsive to you, just think about a veg starter. That could be a green salad, that could be raw vegetables. Any and all of these can really make a big difference. Second thing is, with those vegetables, if you add some vinegar, about a tablespoon of vinegar also will reduce your blood glucose spike and can really help you to manage your blood sugar. This has been very well researched and documented. It really, really works. Now, the third thing, and probably the most effective way to manage your postprandial blood glucose, meaning that spike or that valley, is simply to move around after you eat. The results of this are so predictable and so dramatic, it's almost like a magic blood glucose pill that no one talks about. Here's what you do. After you eat, sometime in the first 30 minutes, go for a casual stroll. Walk around the block, take your dog out, go out and watch the sunset, whatever it might be. Shockingly big difference to your blood glucose. And when you do that every night after dinner, the compounding results are really, really dramatic. So that's some ideas for working on your blood glucose. What if we look at blood pressure? This is a lot more complicated, but there is really, really solid evidence around breathing exercises, especially resistance breathing. We've done a video on that in the past. I'll link up here above. And also stress management in general. Whatever works for you for stress management, whether that's prayer or meditation or breathing exercises or mindfulness, anything that can help you manage stress can very often have a positive long-term effect on your blood pressure, especially if you are consistent with it. And then there are the obvious dietary things like reducing sodium, which a lot of people find surprisingly easy. And again, fixing your blood pressure isn't going to have this massive effect on your weight, but oftentimes it can move the needle a little bit. You get the ball rolling, and then slowly and healthfully and steadily, it can help to lead to filling in all of these potholes along your journey to metabolic health. Last one I want to talk about is LDL cholesterol. And LDL is potentially, not always, but potentially atherosclerotic, so it can cause problems. And it's really easy to knock it down. Now, a lot of people turn to statins, and statins certainly do lower your LDL cholesterol. However, they're probably not going to have any effect on your weight because you're doing it with a pharmaceutical intervention. I am not in any way recommending you do or do not take statins, but I'd like to talk to you about some strategies for reducing your LDL, which almost always will have positive metabolic outcomes, and in many cases that will trickle upstream and affect your weight, not in the short term, but in the medium and the long term. And the first one is fiber. Fiber helps to bind with LDL cholesterol. Your body recycles cholesterol, and when you have a lot of fiber in your system, it prevents the recycling of cholesterol and can be very effective at lowering your LDL cholesterol. That can be increasing your fiber intake like we talked about before with raw vegetables. You could also use something like psyllium husk, super inexpensive, clinically proven, especially when combined with a statin, to dramatically reduce your LDL cholesterol. Other things, reducing your saturated fat. Saturated fat's really, really healthy, really important. People don't call it essential, but I bet it's essential. I bet there are things in there that you really need to have. But there's a tipping point. And if you stay under 10 grams per day of saturated fat, this will have a massive, massive difference. The consumption of saturated fat and its effects on your LDL cholesterol, they're not linear. It's basically like an L curve. And so once you get past a tipping point, which for many people is around 9 or 10 grams per day, that's when things start to really spike. So reducing your saturated fat for most people is really pretty easy. Just swapping out saturated fats with monounsaturated fats or polyunsaturated fats with things like olive oil or nuts or seeds or whatever other forms of avocados and other forms of fats that you might have, that can make a big difference. And simultaneously adding in the medicinal fat, the essential fatty acids of omega-3 fats. That could come from flax seeds or chia seeds. It could come from krill or fish oil supplements. There are lots of different ways to get it, but the heart health, LDL cholesterol lowering benefits of these are very well documented, and again, pretty easy to implement. Now, lowering triglycerides is a little more tricky, but usually when you work on any one of these other three, that will come down a little bit as well. But this is a way to think about metabolic health, not just as revving the engine, but instead fixing those potholes, working on balance so that your path, your journey towards metabolic health is quite a bit smoother. Hope you found this helpful. For more science-based yoga, nutrition, health span videos, click subscribe down below. Don't forget to grab that PDF you'll find down below. I have a teaching calendar. It's online at yogabody.com. I have a daily program called YOGABODY Daily where you can train with me. Hope you found this video. Love to hear from you in the comments section. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you in the next video.